Hi, I'm here with Amy White. And Amy, I'm so excited and welcoming you to our Extraordinary Results event.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. I just find you fascinating. I got connected with Amy through someone I really admire. And as I started to pour through Amy's website and the things that she creates, she's really got a diverse group of skill sets, which I really find fascinating. And I'm sure because of that, you can really offer the people that you work with some really well-rounded perspectives. I'm just going to go
Absolutely.
through just a bit of what you have to offer, what you've offered already. She has two international best-selling books, and one is called Closer to Paradise: A Mother's Journey Through Crisis and Healing, and another one is for business, Beautiful Breakthrough to Business Strategies. And so Amy has this deep understanding of family and personal interactions with children and the kind of emotions connected with that. And then she's got this corporate business background, and then she took that towards she's an intuitive, so she's a medium, and I just find that fabulous. I love it. She's a channeled intuitive, and she offers intuitive business assessment services for Fortune 100 companies as well as small and medium businesses. So, Amy, welcome. I'm fascinated by your background and your curiosity for engaging in life.
Yeah. To say that my journey from where I started to where I am now was not linear is probably the understatement of the century. Really and truly, if I had, looked at my life 20 years ago and said, what did I think I was going to be doing? Being an intuitive medium, a channel, a truth bomb dropper wouldn't have ever been in my foresight, even in my purview, right? I mean, just like it's kind of a crazy evolution, but it's also like so guided. It's been so guided that I knew, even though I was really moving in directions that were curious to me, especially away from the corporate work and into the coaching and intuitive work, I just trusted it step by step by step.
So Amy has an electrical engineering degree, and let's see, it's with telecommunications. It's got like an emphasis in telecommunications. So
Yeah.
what did you do with that degree? And then how did you know that it was time for you to make a shift? Because the reason I bring this up is a lot of people have a goal in mind when they're younger about what they want, and often they shoot past that goal. It might have been a perfect trajectory for a certain amount of time. And I think it'd
Totally.
be valuable if you can talk to how you started to understand that maybe you were past that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing I just want to say is that one of the things that I wish someone had told me when I was coming out of college was, you're not, you haven't made this commitment to this path, that you're going to change paths many, many times through the course of your adult life, and all of it's good. All of it's good. We tend to get into these mindsets as humans, right? That when we make a choice, that we have to stick with it, that
Yeah.
that was the decision we made. We put time and energy and effort, right? I went to school and got a degree.
Yeah.
And yet, as I moved through my process, that permission to know that it was okay for me to make changes would have been really beautiful earlier on. But I learned it anyway, and it was
Yeah.
exactly divinely the way that it was supposed to. But I started my career out of college working in telecommunications engineering. And in those moments, it really was a passion for me. I loved being in business. I loved like seeing how things came together, came apart. I worked for many Fortune 100 companies along my career path, and I really was very methodical and very purposeful in desiring to climb the ladder. So I moved from engineering to engineering project management to managing engineers and project managers to managing larger and larger and larger organizations, moving out of engineering and into more operations. I worked in finance. I worked in purchasing. I worked in all kinds of different facets of operations for many companies, and all the time climbing the ladder.
Yeah.
And like you said, I did get to a point. There are two really big pivot points. You brought up my book, Closer to Paradise: A Mother's Journey Through Crisis and Healing. And that was a story of my journey supporting my son through a mental health crisis. And when that crisis happened, it really gave me pause to look around my entire life and say, what am I doing? What do I love? Who are the people I want in my life? What are the things I want to be doing day to day? Like, what gets me out of bed every day?
Yeah.
And I started to make some decisions about, really, really being honest with myself about the fact that the corporate work, the corporate roles I had been in and was in, weren't really lighting my fire anymore. But because of that whole crisis, it still took a couple of years for me to really fully unwind it. But here I was climbing the ladder, got to the top of the ladder. I was running, I was in the C-suite running purchasing and strategic procurement for a very large company on the East Coast. And I looked around the top rung of this ladder and I was thinking, oh my gosh, the ladder has been leaning against the wrong wall. Like,
Wow.
this is not who I am anymore. This is not what I love anymore. Now, of course, I was also sort of, as a side hustle, I was started coaching. So the last 10 years of my corporate career, I was also doing executive and business coaching on the side. And as I started to do that, I realized, oh my gosh, like, I have a passion for this. And not only that, it was really when I started to tap into my intuition and recognize that I knew things about my clients that I didn't know how I knew, but I knew them. And I used that as a way to direct and facilitate and support and guide my clients. And
Yeah.
so as I was building that practice and coming into deeper connection with my intuitive knowing, I was also coming to the honest realization that this corporate role, in the way that it was structured and the way that I had arrived in it, was no longer my big thing. And
Yeah.
so
If I
yeah,
could
yeah.
interject there, you mentioned your ladder being on the wrong wall.
Yeah.
I just think a lot of people, I did it for a time and I switched as well from a career that I loved for a period of time. But a lot of people get so focused on a career or even a life choice,
Yeah.
and they just keep stepping towards it and stepping towards it. And they don't really take time to breathe or think, am I still on the right path? Could I?
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
could be something we could bring up later, perhaps. But
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
know,
Because I think that word that I used describing it was an honest, like, I had to get honest with myself.
yeah,
I think that we're conditioned, many of us, from a very young age, that we are supposed to stick with things to the bitter end. It's like, you want to know that you gave your 125%
yeah.
to something before you call it off, or before
Or
you
it's a
decide to
failure
pivot,
when an
or it's
earlier adjustment could be a great success.
exactly.
Leaving the wrong thing is a great
Yeah,
success. So we'll be
completely.
talking about this. So it's a great segue into what we'll talk about later, finding
Yeah.
out if you're in the right space.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely. Yeah.
great. So is there anything else? So you started coaching, and that led you,
Yeah.
at what point did you make that step completely out of your corporate world?
What was really interesting and very divinely timed for me, I had been interviewing for a different job, same position, but even a higher level, running a bigger organization. And the day that the offer from that, so I knew I was done with this company that I was at. The day that the offer was supposed to come from this other company, the VP of HR called and said, the CEO just put a freeze on every job. And so we really want to hire you. Please, trust that we're going to do this with you. And I said, okay, no worries. And for whatever reason, I had this big sense of peace within me. And I hung up from the VP of HR and I picked up the phone and I called my husband at the time, and said, I'm giving my 2 weeks notice. I'm done. I know I'm done. There is every cell in my body says I'm done. I don't know what I'm doing from here. We'll figure it out. And he said, all right, you know, I've been watching your process. I know what you're focused on, and we'll make it work. And so I
Right.
literally gave a 2 weeks notice with no job lined up, really no safety net. But my inner guidance, my inner being, like my soul was just shouting at me, like, get out. It's time. You know, we've been preparing you for what's next. And honestly, it was one of the greatest jumps off a cliff and expecting the net to appear moment of my life, because within 30 days I had working with a group to write that first book that you mentioned, the Bold is Beautiful business strategies book. I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast. I opened my coaching practice, and my calendar was full to the gills. And even though I wasn't calling it intuitive coaching at the time, that's really what I was doing. And I
Yeah.
think the energy of that, and just really being willing to follow the breadcrumbs, even if I didn't know where I was being led, was the force behind me that just kept me going, moving, and trusting.
Yeah, that's beautiful what you said about the net appearing, because so
Yeah.
often in my life I found that you have to take the steps. You have to take the steps where you're not quite sure, but you have the feeling before the next thing
Totally.
presents itself.
Yeah.
You often hear about someone who is really unhappy in their job, and they either left it or they did something and got fired. And within a short rest period, they're in the best job they ever had because
Completely.
they needed a
Completely.
shift.
Yep. Yeah. And
So
and I also believe that, you know, you can listen to the calling, or you can not listen to the calling, but when it's time, it's time. And so I knew part of the reason why I had so much peace when I decided to resign from my position was I knew that if I didn't, the universe was going to be really loud about my need to shift.
yeah,
And so I wanted to co-create that shift with my inner being, with source, with God, love, Fred, whatever
instead of
word works.
fighting. Yeah.
Yeah, instead of resisting it, because the resisting I had learned through a lot of experience in my life was only going to create more challenge for me.
Yeah, I mean, people end up in huge turmoil. They're afraid to, I'm going to say, leave a position again.
Yeah.
And they stay longer and longer, and things keep coming at them. There's an interesting saying I heard years ago, a feather, pebble, and a brick.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
you get that gentle feather that comes down and brushes you, gives you that idea, that initial idea. And if you're in tune, you say yes and you understand it. The
Yeah.
next step after you've ignored that is you just get a pebble between the eyes, and finally you just get a brick right in the head. And
Yeah.
that's the trauma a lot of people wait for before they finally make the decision. They're in
Yeah.
complete turmoil, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Right. And back to what I was saying a few minutes ago about how we're conditioned, a lot of us as humans, you know, that we stick with something to the bitter end. And I mean, my spirit guides were standing there with bricks, you know, and
Prepared.
I knew what was coming, and I got to choose right in that moment. It was not because I was unafraid. It was more feel the fear and do it anyway. And also trusting that I knew for me, it was the right thing. I tell my clients often, especially when I'm working with coaching clients, not everyone is asked every time to take that giant leap, right? And expect the net to appear. There are many times where, and especially when you get it early on, to
Got that.
start to lay the groundwork, lay the groundwork so that it is an easier transition.
Yeah,
But
like
for
you
me,
started
it
doing with
was,
your coaching. I mean,
yeah,
you
yeah,
started laying the groundwork. And often it's really clear to us when we look back on it what was happening, but at the
yeah,
time it seems more dramatic than it is.
completely.
So when we first chatted, we talked about you know, understanding if you're authentically in the right place for yourself. And you're gonna talk to us about that today. Um, you know, there's sometimes we're efforting so much, and it's really not, we're trying to prove ourselves in this lifetime. And sometimes you get to the point in your life where you finally don't have to do that anymore. You know, you don't have to do that anymore. You just need to go
Yeah.
towards the joy. But how would you suggest to people? What could you tell us about? There's a lot of people who are, they might be in the perfect job for themselves, or they might not be. They might be interested in pursuing farther and with more focus in the area they're in, or they might, how can they find out if they're in the wrong, maybe in the
Yeah.
wrong spot, or they need a shift? How can we find out if we're in our real authentic spot is what I'm asking, I guess.
Yeah, I love that question because I think none of us are ever in a wrong spot,
Yeah,
right? Every experience that we have here in this on this journey, each one of us individually is so valuable,
yeah,
whether it's deemed right or wrong. I mean, whether we call it good or bad.
yeah,
And I think going back to what I was saying a few minutes ago is this idea that when we can come into connection with ourselves and really be honest, does this job really bring me joy? If it doesn't bring me joy, are there things that I can do sitting right here at this desk in this moment that can pivot it so that it starts to bring me joy? That's what I was saying before. Not everything's oh, this is awful, I'm leaving, and jump in and expect the net to appear. We have the ability to co-create this. What would bring me joy? Oh, maybe it's this and that or the other thing, but if we can identify what those things are and see a real clear path to bring more of that into the experience, that shifts the am I in the right place or the wrong place. A lot of times in my work I talk about the right now path. It's
yeah,
not the right path or the wrong path, but the right now path.
yeah,
And when you can look at your path in that little bit of a segment, that small segment, and say, okay, right now, let's just tune into this. And then I would say if you can't pivot to bring that joy or bring that satisfaction or that passion back in, then that's the invitation to explore. If
yeah,
I weren't doing this, what would I do? Like I often say to my coaching clients, if it didn't matter money, like if money didn't matter, and you could sit down and design your day, your days exactly how you would want them, how would you picture it? What would you be doing? And many of my corporate clients are like, I would be painting, I would be singing, I would be writing music, I would be communing with nature, and it's like, okay, well, that's where you start. Now you start to say, okay, how do I cobble this together? And then what would that look like? And even if I, have to, as many of us do, keep money, the money piece of it is part of the equation. We
yeah,
can also, we lose sight because we get so myopically focused that we lose sight that we can bring these things in. It's the same reason why I started doing coaching all of those years ago, because I knew what I was doing wasn't bringing me joy. And yet there were reasons why I had to stay in those moments, but I found that I could do something else that filled the well, that
yeah,
filled my, met that need for the passion part of it,
yeah,
the experience for me. And then it made the staying in the corporate job for that period of time easier, because
yeah. I,
I wasn't putting all the pressure on that job to
yes,
be the all end all be all to satisfy me.
yeah. Years ago, I was in a teaching position and I loved it, but it was starting to not be as fresh. And I started commuting on my bike to work. And in my mind, I was going to play. I
Yeah.
was on my way to play. And after school, I would play again on the way home. And it really changed my attitude at my work. I had so much fun at work and I didn't think that I was working. I kind of played a game with myself that I wasn't working.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a small thing, but um, sometimes it can just liven up your job because I was honoring the play part of myself and I was taking some of the tightness out of the day and it really helped me. Gave
Yeah.
me a lot of longevity.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the perfect example for what I was just saying, right?
Yeah.
You stayed in the teaching job, but because you found ways to bring that joy, that play, that exploration, that adventure into your day to day, it
Yeah.
shifted your relationship with the job.
Yeah, and it
And
even
so,
made me feel
yeah,
like I was playing with, when I was up there, I was just playing with other people interested in working
yeah,
with clay or working with paint or, I didn't
yeah,
even think of it as a job anymore. It became a joy.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome. I love that story.
thank you. Thank you. So one of the things we can do then is think in, maybe we're not leaving our position, but we're thinking about the things that are missing in our life. And
Yeah.
we're starting to add those back in so that the job isn't the only thing, because that job could be accessing a part of ourselves that's really important to access and exercise.
Right.
But we're doing it with so much focus that we're leaving out some of the other aptitudes or skill sets that make us feel wonderful every day.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is even as we're having this conversation, I'm picking up sort of the audience that's listening to this, even though they won't hear it, for a little bit of time.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of resistance, right, to this information. And I
Yeah.
get it, because what I'm hearing is, but you don't understand. I have kids, I have, need benefits, I have, these bills, I have. And the thing that we tend to do, again, as humans, and because we've been conditioned this way, very many of us, is this idea that we really can't get off the hamster wheel long enough to look at the bigger picture and say, yes, and
Yes.
right? Yes, and how do I find, even if it's 5 minutes, we start with 5 minutes of sitting in quiet, not even meditation, just like get your coffee, your tea, your Coca-Cola, like whatever you do in the morning, and find a way to sit in quiet. I used to sit in my car in my garage, not running,
Thank
just to
God.
just to get out of my house when my kids were little and the dog was barking. And it was like that time in the morning when it was craziness getting ready for school and getting ready for work and all of that. And I would just take my coffee and sit in the car, and it was 5 minutes of me time, and often I would sneak out of the house so the kids, they were older, like, right, but they didn't necessarily know to look for me right away. And that, even that little bit of time of me, like just for me, started to open up the doors of possibility that, oh, I can bring this in. I can schedule a yoga class 1 time a week. It doesn't have to be this all in 100%, like, oh, you have to do something for an hour a day in order for this to be valuable. No, it's 5 minutes. I teach my clients this practice that I do most mornings. My attention is every morning, but it doesn't always happen. But when I wake up, and roll out of bed, I put my feet on the floor and I just stay there for a minute. And it's like dropping a pin. If you think about like dropping a pin on a digital map, right? It's
Yeah.
like, I am here. And I give myself just a couple minutes to like come into my body, be present in the moment, and set an intention for how I want the day to feel. Not my to-do list, not that, what other people need or want from me, but like, what do I want to feel today? Oh, I want to feel play. I want to feel joy. I want to be surprised by life in good ways. Those
That's
types.
beautiful. I mean, to think about, you are the only one in that exact precise position in the universe at that moment. It
Yeah.
gave me tingles when you suggested it.
Yeah, it's a really
Beautiful.
beautiful, easy, and we're talking 2 minutes, 1 to 2 minutes, or longer, depending. I tend to like to stay there because it's like, ooh, we walk around this world so disconnected from our bodies, all of us at times, right? And that moment to really like be in my body and be in that present moment, it feels delicious,
Yeah.
and I really look forward to it as often as I can remember or remind myself to do
Yeah.
it.
When I meditate, when I finally shut the thing down,
Yeah.
I smile. I mean, I can tell when I got there. I smile because
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in playland. I am cut loose. I'm liberated.
Yeah.
And that what you're suggesting there is a great
Yeah.
exercise.
Yeah, and I happen to call myself a little bit of a meditation rebel,
Yeah.
because the sitting in silence is not something that I've been able to really fully embody. And
Yeah.
so for me, meditation is running,
Mhm.
meditation is walking the dog, meditation is driving in my car. Like there's all kinds of
Yeah.
ways I give myself permission for meditation to look the whatever way it needs to look,
I'm
so
glad
that
you
I
said
get
that.
the
Yeah.
value out of it, right?
Yeah.
Instead of trying to beat myself into submission to
Yeah.
get my brain to shut down and stop talking, which is really not the whole intention of meditation anyway, right? But when we do things, there's a saying that I love, it's chop wood, carry water, right? And it's this idea that when we're doing the mundane, washing the dishes, like I said, walking the dog or driving, running errands in the car, our brain is tied up in the doing of those tasks. And then we can allow space for the information, for the wisdom of our inner being, our intuition to really come in ways that don't work for everyone in seated, quiet meditation.
Yeah. There are some people who are really, really energetic,
Yeah.
and someone tells them to meditate and they just feel so unsuccessful. And
Yeah.
I find too, when I go out for a long run, I just go into
Exactly.
I go
Yes.
into a really incredible meditation on the
Yeah.
country road. Yeah.
Completely. I get some of my biggest downloads when I'm running or riding my bike or doing some
Yeah.
kind of repetitive movement practice. It's
Yeah.
really powerful.
I've heard some ideas about how the Eastern philosophy is more sitting and being still, but the Western way of living is more active. And so having an active meditation is
Yeah.
actually super effective for us
Yeah.
because we're
And part of,
moving.
yeah. And part of my passion in the work that I do is to help people to see that there isn't one way, that we really do have empowered authority over our personal experience
Yeah.
to say this, we've been talking about this the whole conversation. This doesn't work for me, but
Mhm.
what would?
Yeah.
Seated meditation where I can't scratch my nose or shift my body doesn't work for me. I go into resistance. And
Uh-huh.
and when I'm in resistance, then I'm shut down and I'm not connected to the all that I could be if I weren't. So giving myself permission to do things a different way allows the resistance to fall away.
Yeah.
It makes me feel empowered that I'm co-creating the experience. And it's not just like follow the rules, follow the rules, follow the
Yeah.
rules.
That
And that's where the magic happens for all of us.
you mentioned before, the audience who was listening saying, but, that's the resistance. So could you
Completely.
talk to us about when we start budding?
Yeah.
What what do you find to be effective for people to help them to see that they're doing it and then allow a shift?
Yeah.
I like to allow a shift so I can release that big butt.
Yeah, completely. Well, I think our bodies are just these fantastic antennas to our inner being, our inner knowing. And so when we feel discomfort, when we start to get that anxious feeling or that wobble,
Yeah.
feeling, it's a great indicator that something is not in alignment for what our inner being is calling us towards. And so a great way to understand resistance is to feel it, right? We feel resistance. And
For a
so
reason. Yeah.
for a reason is an indicator, right? That, okay, it gives us the opportunity to take a little bit of a step back and say, if I'm in resistance to this, just like we just talked about a few minutes ago, what can I do to shift this to allow me to not be in resistance? There's this whole idea of what we resist persists. What we're pushing against, we see more and more of. And so, when we can find what is our path of least resistance, whatever that looks like, and this is the key, it's not dependent on what anyone else is saying, anyone else's opinions, social, cultural, input. It is really about what works for me and giving myself permission to be in that space of, oh, I don't have to push against this. I can find a different way to do it where it feels good to me. And I love the idea of like, you want to drop the but. I often will use the term this and.
Mhm.
So we don't have to deny our feeling.
Yeah.
What the energy beings I channel call themselves the greater consciousness. And the greater consciousness says, we're here in this human experience to learn how to bring the human side of this aspect of ourselves and the soul aspect of ourselves together in the same moment. So we don't have to deny the human experience or what we're feeling, struggle with, or challenged by, but we can say this and instead of but, but just holds us back. But when we
Have-
say, yes, I'm feeling this resistance, and there are pathways and options and opportunities for me to make some shifts. Now, that can feel overwhelming to people.
Yeah.
And so I would say if you're listening to this and you feel the resistance bubbling up, or this is a lot of what I'm hearing these days from clients is, I'm just soul exhausted. I'm physically exhausted. I'm soul exhausted. The thought of having to do one more task or one more to do in my daily life feels really overwhelming. And so then the invitation is, can you be open to the possibility
Mm,
that the resistance can shift with a simple, not easy, but simple this and statement?
yeah.
Yes, this is my truth and my reality, and there are other possibilities here. And then
I
sometimes
have,
it's waiting for the possibilities to show themselves.
yeah, I have found lately, I enjoy when I recognize I have a resistance and then I get curious about it. And I think,
Yeah.
huh, that's curious. What's that about? And I
Yeah.
find out things about myself. And sometimes I find out the resistance is actually kind of something silly. And
Yeah.
it's that simple. I can let it go because it's silly.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
it's not, it's just, it's become a fascination for me.
Yeah.
What feeling a resistance.
Yeah, I think it's one of the greatest indicators our body gives us, is that opportunity to go, ooh, what is this feeling? Oh, this is resistance. And so often the resistance comes because we're carrying with us these stories and beliefs, right? That we were conditioned from a young age to believe, or that were projections on us at some point in our
Yeah.
lives, that these stories aren't really even our truth.
Yeah.
But the story that says, I can't do this, or this would be looked upon, as a failure. Well, those beliefs create the resistance, because when we say, well, the path of least resistance would be to be open to whatever options might be here, even if it feels like the it balks up against the social constructs.
Yeah. So we have all these different things we can be bumping into.
Completely.
So our own internal beliefs, our societal beliefs, and then we're the ultimate decision maker though. We can decide it's okay, but the resistance is telling us something. That's what you're saying, that the
Completely.
resistance is just a great indicator that we're not in alignment with those two parts you mentioned, the soul part and the physical part.
Yeah.
So, what do we need to do? So,
Yeah.
in relation to our livelihoods,
Yeah.
you kind of, how can we give ourselves permission to delve further in or start stepping towards something else? What are some of the things that you'd suggest to give ourselves permission so we can get in alignment within our own careers, and then that will spill over into our families?
Yeah, I think the first thing I just want to state really clearly is, we talked about jumping off the cliff and wait and trusting that the net would appear, but that really many of us are being called to just look at it step by step by step. The
Mhm.
first part really is this acknowledgement that I do have, the authority over my own experience. So no matter what I'm told, I can make choices that are in my highest. And that and this is a universal law, and I see it work over and over and over with my clients, that when we make decisions based on what is our truth, and when I say truth, like our capital T truth, right? That part of us that knows what it knows, that the
Yeah.
wisdom, right, that's within us, that everything falls in line. It's not, we often tell these stories, and what keeps us in resistance is, I'm going to take this step and it's all going to fall apart. But many times when we're taking that step, most often when we're taking that step from a place of alignment, of really listening to our soul guidance, the path opens up. The path opens up. the things come that we need. In my own experience, like I said, I mean, within 6 months, it was like a fire hose on my back as soon as I made the decision to leave that job and explore this, whatever I was being guided to. And it was a place of uncertainty because I didn't quite know. But it was like one thing showed up, then another thing showed up, then this opportunity showed up, then this experience showed up, and it was step by step by step. I didn't have to force it, or I didn't have to make it happen. I didn't have to go look for the components to come together. They came together because I put myself in alignment on the path of all of those things that were waiting for me to come into alignment. And so it is a step by step thing for many of us. And that's okay.
Yeah,
you
it doesn't
know?
have to be death defying.
No, and I would say, especially in the time and space of the world that we live in, that very rarely have I seen that being the calling, right? To just do this huge leap, because there's so much uncertainty in the world, going on right now. And we don't have to be in that space of it's only good if we, jump off the
If
cliff.
it's dramatic, it doesn't have
Right.
to be dramatic.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's where a lot of us are being called. I talk a lot about this in my work. It's like right now we're building a bridge, but it's not we build the bridge and then we walk across it and we see the other side. It's like we take a step, that segment of the bridge forms around us. The people, the places, the things, the experiences come in and allow us to sort of shore up that section of the bridge. And then when we feel inspired, we take the next step and that segment of the bridge forms, and the next step and that segment of the bridge forms. And we're really all in that bridge building, space today.
Yeah.
We don't really know where we're going in the grander evolutionary consciousness up leveling
Yeah.
scheme of things. And yet we don't have to know.
How did your engineering job, you just described bridge building. So how did your engineering job, we don't waste anything and nothing's a mistake. So how have you found your past job to have been influential in what you're doing now?
Well, what's been really influential is that it has allowed me to very easily run a business. As an intuitive, right? I work with clients, I work in groups, I work in large audience settings, but there's a whole machine, behind the scenes that, has to be managed on a day-to-day basis. And so
Yeah.
all of that, the practicality piece, right? The left brain part of the engineering of the business, the different businesses that I ran and business organizations that I ran, has really translated into, making it an easier way for me to do both the running of my business and the running of my business. It
Yeah.
also, though, translates into that intuitive business assessment work that I do, because I really, my left brain needs to be fed, and
I do.
when I deny that aspect of myself, things get a little rocky. And so I learned that I do things that allow me to feed that side of me, as
Yeah.
well as the more right brain creative woo woo side of me. And that is too that part where I'm bringing together, right, the human and the soul experience
Yeah.
in the same moment.
That really drew me to your bio information because I'm helping launch a tech company right now. I'm doing all the nitty gritty of that tech company, and I'm a studio artist and I'm an educator. And I need to stretch, flex the muscles of all these different skill sets
Yes,
to feel fully alive.
completely.
So, I mean, what a great segue too, in that just letting people know to honor the facets of that which they are. How
Yeah.
important it is that to be um, feeding all these different aspects of our person, of our being.
It's of the utmost importance, because we just talked about that. When we're denying any aspect of ourselves, we're not in wholeness. We're
Yeah.
not in alignment, in the deepest alignment with our inner knowing, our inner being, our souls that we
Yeah.
could be. And I think that I did that for a long time. I left corporate world. And I was like, never again, never again. And then life kept presenting like, oh, here's a project with this tech startup. Here's this project. Here's another project. And I wasn't seeking it out, but it kept coming and kept coming. And finally I was like, okay, I get it. And I said yes,
I get it.
right, to each of this, but I'm like, oh, this is like everything. And this for me was so important. I came to this place where I realized everything that I do is spiritual. Everything that I do is evolutionary,
Yeah.
whether it's business or intuitive work or something in between. So I don't have to like push against or resist the opportunity to use that. I mean, I came into this life experience to use that intellectual
Otherwise you
skill.
wouldn't have it. You
Or
wouldn't be
otherwise I
there.
wouldn't have it. And so, and you know, and that allows me to not deny that aspect of myself, because some story that says, oh, well, intuitive should be this way or look this way or act this way. You know, I get into these conversations a lot with people
Yeah.
because they're like, wow, you're not what we picture as an intuitive. You have tattoos and piercings and, you know, you pole dance and you do all of these things that don't fit the mold. And I'm like, but it fits my mold.
Bravo. Yeah.
Right?
And you
Yeah.
know, we talked about authenticity. The more authentic we are, I don't know, at a certain point in my life, when you're young, you're just so authentic. When you're a little child, there's so much, it just oozes out of your pores like the sun radiates.
Yeah.
And then we have beautiful adults who want to teach us structures. They want us to have a good life, and it's well intended. And then
Absolutely.
we get to a point where we become so tight that we have to release what we remember about who we really are,
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
authentic nature.
And I really
And
believe that we're here for that purpose.
yeah,
Like
to
to
learn
remember,
that,
to remember.
to
Yeah.
go this way and that way. Yeah, to come back, to remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. But then once, you have this fearfulness of being, can I really be myself? Well, will I really be, you get treated so beautifully when you're yourself. The
You do.
real surprising thing is the more yourself you are, the more you're accepted.
Well,
And
and the more you,
the
yeah,
more
go ahead.
unique you are at the same time.
Yeah, but as you become more and more authentic, when you remember that authentic part of yourself, you're also vibrating at a level that invites people who are a vibrational match to your energy. But
That's
the
right.
reality is, in this human experience, that also means that as you are increasing your vibration, there are those that can no longer hold space for that vibration. So there are mismatched vibrations now that will fall away.
And
And
the right people come in and
the
the
right
right people
people come in.
pass through.
Yeah, but as humans, that's a hard thing, and one of the things that the greater consciousness says all the time is that, they honor the fact that as humans, that part can be really hard. And especially for those of us that have come up with, developmental traumas or childhood traumas that bring, the fear of abandonment or the fear of being judged or the fear of looking like a failure into such strong uh, has such a strong play in our lives
Yeah.
that those fears tend to sometimes outweigh the being able to span that
Yeah.
part of the bridge that says no, but
But once you do,
those that are vibrational matches, they won't abandon you. And
yeah.
those that can't hold space for who you now are, well, they're really not meant to be on this leg
Yeah,
of
and they're on their
evolution.
own learning trajectory. So it's all okay. It's all
It
just
is.
perfect.
It
Yeah.
is. Yeah. Yeah. One of my favorite spiritual teachers said recently, um, to know the rightness of our paths,
Mm,
right? And
beautiful.
that rightness, that no matter where you are, any of us in this moment, we have rightness on our path. It is rightness.
Yeah.
Nothing is a mistake.
All is well.
We're
Yeah.
doing nothing wrong here. you know
That's a beautiful thing to know.
yeah, every
Wow.
experience is for expansion and
Yeah.
evolution.
You're not
you know
stumbling around. We're not stumbling
no.
around like we're drunk.
No, but we can make it hard on ourselves. The Buddhists say that all suffering is created internally, right? you know, when we start to really listen to our inner wisdom, whether we call it that or not, you know, our guidance, our inspiration,
Yeah.
what we will find is that so often we are led one step, one step, one step towards these amazing experiences that have more ease and flow than when we're pushing against it, when we're in resistance to it.
Mhm.
You know, that ease and flow, that grace and space that's here for us, that's universal law. We get in, our human sides of us get in and we muck it up sometimes. And that's
Yeah.
okay, right? Because we learn so much from that contrast.
Yeah. It's okay.
But we don't have to learn that way.
We
I
don't have to
remember,
be suffering. I mean,
yeah, no.
it's all the meaning that we give things.
Yeah,
This is a beautiful life of learning opportunities and growth opportunities.
yeah,
Amy White,
absolutely.
I want to thank you for this brief conversation. It seems
I
like it was
know.
10 minutes,
Oh
and
my
hopefully
gosh.
maybe we can continue sometime in the future.
Absolutely.
Is there somewhere that this audience can connect with you? Is there something that you want to say before we end here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing, as you said earlier, and I just so appreciate the mirroring, is that I am a multifaceted being. My website really helps to sort of describe all of the different work that I do, but there's free videos and there's, you know, free recordings of courses and classes I've done before. All of the services are there. I mean, it's really a great place to learn about the work that I do, both here in the intuitive space, in the business space, in the advocacy space. And I'm, so that's, I always say it's amywhite.co. It's like
Yes.
the place to go. But I'm also on all the socials, Instagram, Facebook, all of the links, YouTube, all of the links are there on my website. And you know, please don't download some of the free videos because I think they're very timely, talking about the energy of what we're experiencing right now, you know, and how to navigate it easier.
Well, I feel very blessed by you connecting with me and the audience. You're such a beautiful human being, and thank you for
Oh,
sharing
it's an
your
honor and a
energy
privilege.
and
Yeah,
everything with us today. Thank you
thank
so much,
you.
Amy White.